Hi everyone, welcome to the DLD Nature track, Unlocking the Radical Imagination and Falling in Love with Life. So my name is Ruby, and my sister Christabel, we're going to host this track, and we've invited a group of speakers who are going to really put the human back in the conversation alongside nature. So Steffi shared with me the other day that she saw DLD as the dissident cell within the broader bird ecosystem. And I love this idea of the dissident cell spinning at its own frequency, setting into motion change beyond its size. And I wanted to borrow this idea of the dissident cell for our track today, as we're thinking about individual agency within systems and change as a relational process. In that vein, I wanted to take the words of Mary Oliver to remember our place in the family of things. So, taking Paul Stamets's great introduction around ecosystems, an ecosystem is usually understood as a community of interrelating organisms in a particular place, or the systems that emerge through the interrelationship of these places and the organisms. So it's all about relationships, and ecology is the study of those relationships. Ecosystems can be stable, resilient, integrated, or not. They can be harmonious and disharmonious. Looking at the world around us, you could say that the disharmony we see is a crisis of relationship, that there's a breakdown in humanity's relational biosphere, our relationships with ourselves, each other, and the world around us. And while this is not entirely new, the difference is that through our technologies, very little is outside the reach of human impact, and that has very real moral implications. And those consequences don't arise in a vacuum. They're very much the result of a particular way of seeing the world, a way of seeing the world that is inert, separable, broken out into small parts, rather than a web of relationship. Nature is something out there, rather than part of us. We're not really part of that living system, that living reality. It's not surprising that systems built on these assumptions would be so extractive and life-denying. What's interesting and hopeful is that across science, philosophy, and culture, many of these assumptions are now coming under question. And as more interconnected ways of seeing the world emerge, new possibilities open up when it comes to how we see change and agency and action. DLD this year is rightly focused on the bigger questions of AI, as things are getting wild in a very metaphorical sense, but less so in real terms. So we wanted to bring back the conversation to getting wild in real terms, in natural terms, in terms of nature. So we're going to be looking at how we are living, our art of living, within our contexts, how we are living in the best possible way, and how that impacts our relationship with society, with politics, with economics, and how we can bring life and nature back to the very center of every conversation.
Thank you, Ruby. If the crises we face are relational at their core, then solutions that remain purely technical or extractive are always going to fall short. And what we believe is required is a much deeper shift in how we perceive ourselves, our place in the world, and what is possible. And this is where igniting the collective radical imagination becomes essential, not as fantasy, but as our ability to reestablish ourselves in a positive, reciprocal orientation towards life. The futures that we imagine shape the systems that we build and the choices that we make. And most people, especially young people, when you ask them about the future, paint a dystopian picture. About the future, paint a dystopian future. Something akin to Mad Max or The Matrix. Collapse, control, fragmentation, isolation. And these stories are not neutral. They quietly train us to expect less of ourselves and of each other. And they erode our faith in our collective capacity to create and maintain the alternatives. So radical imagination, as we understand it in our work at Advaya, the organization my sister and I started 10 years ago, is a practice of reclaiming our collective capacity to envision life-centered, regenerative futures and then to create them. Futures rooted not in domination or optimization, but in belonging, reciprocity, and care. And for us, we believe this work is both inner and outer because the worlds that we create externally are inseparable from the inner landscapes that we inhabit. Our sense of wonder or lack thereof, of meaning and connection, shapes how we are acting. And I believe that we've fallen out of love with life, and it is very clear from how we treat it. I see the invitation is to cultivate enchantment and awe, to have a practice of seeing the extraordinary that lies in the heart of the seemingly ordinary every day. And falling in love with life may seem sentimental or trite, but I see this as a political and ecological act, because love gives us motivation, imagination gives us vision, and practice gives us the pathway. And it's this last piece, practice, that I see so lost in the sort of most engaged parts of this space. To make radical imagination a reality, we need to relearn skills, relearn traditional ecological knowledge. We need to actively participate, get our hands dirty in restoring nature and regenerating our local environments. And this is why we started Earth, to teach people how to do just this for free. Because when people experience themselves as part of living systems, when they have an active role in them, something fundamental shifts, transformation occurs, agency returns, hope becomes active, and most importantly, radical imagination can become reality. And so we're so honored to be joined by 6 incredible humans that we invited here for you. These individuals have been making waves of real transformation and joy in our world. And speaking personally, they have irrevocably transformed the way that Ruby and I see the world and how we work within it. And it brings me to our first speaker, Professor Thomas Crowther, founder of Crowther Labs, Restore, and most recently Branch, an international network of labs across 6 universities that is studying the relationship between biodiversity, equality, and human well-being. When I first encountered Tom's work, my whole world transformed. I started to understand what was really possible, because I was able to see that there is a thriving, global, peer-driven, bottom-up movement of people restoring nature, that this isn't a top-down intervention, but it's something that is living and breathing and that we can all participate in. So please put your hands together and give Tom a very warm welcome.